Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Leadership in Politics with Dr. Abraham. On the show today with me, I have two exceptional guests, Dr. Diane Hamilton and Dr. Maja Zelihic. Dr. Maja, welcome. This is your second time on the show.
That's correct. That's correct. Thank you so much for having us, Abe. Really a pleasure.
You're most welcome. My audience are lucky because this is the third friend guest on the show. We have a milestone. This is your third time on the show.
It is. It's always wonderful to be here. Thank you, because we're really excited to talk about perception. So this is going to be fun.
It's wonderful. It's my great honor to have you both. Why perception? What's important about it? Who would like to start?
Yeah. Well, I'll go ahead and get started. Well, Diane and I, we were talking about many different concepts, and perception was one of the ones that we started focusing on, and we started thinking about several core questions. What is the value of perception? What is our perception of our own selves? What are we trying to project for the others to perceive? And then what is your perception of your company, of others within your company? Mm-hmm. And what influences each? And why is the perception crucial in the world of business? So our book is really focusing on the concepts of perception within a business setting and how perception ties to the concept of leadership and how to build global leaders as we polish our perception.
As you polish the perception. And thank you for introducing that. And Dr. Diane, why is perception so important?
As Dr. Zelihic, I'm going to call her Maja, friends, has stated, perception was really interesting to us because you hear a lot about cultural influences. And as you know, I studied curiosity and its influence. And I was starting to look at this as what's going to make a really global, effective leader. And we know that companies that are diverse are much more successful. We know that if companies don't focus on culture, though, that the majority of them fail because they have all this conflict. So we started to think, well, what does this tie into? And perception really, to me and to Maja, as we started talking about this, it's kind of an IQ, EQ, emotional quotient for your emotional intelligence, CQ for cultural quotient, and CQ for curiosity quotient, all combined. So if you can work on all these things and have an idea of how you perceive yourself, how others perceive you, it gets that emotional quotient in there. But there's also a lot of critical thinking from the IQ perspective in there, and it combines the culture. So really what we looked at was the whole process of what goes into perception. Because if you recognize that process and how it's different for us versus other people, then you can be truly successful.
It's very true. So we're talking about the perceptual process. Mm-hmm. So for those, Dr. Maja, for those who don't know what perception is, they understand possibly, or they heard of the term. Let's go ahead and define what perception.
Well, perception, varies based on our culture. It varies based on our experience. And it's actually, it's that factor that shapes and alters our thinking. And perception helps us in life, not just business setting, but also our personal lives, in order to become more effective, in order to be better decision makers, better judges of character, and also better leaders. So it's a uniquely individualized concept, deeply embedded trait of our human condition. So the question is, can that be shaped? And our answer is yes. So that is one of the definitions of perception. There are many others. And as Diane was mentioning is, in order to work more effectively in this multicultural global environment we all live in, we have to have a bit more of a conscious approach of being aware and better managing our perception.
Nicely put. I read through your book, and thank you for sending the segments you have sent or section you have sent, which made me more enlightened and self-aware as well myself. The way you put it, you are gearing towards business people, business leaders. And one particular thing, I teach my students, as you know, I teach organizational behavior. And one lesson, one of the chapters in that course deals with perception.
Hmm.
I've always been a champion of suspend your judgment, but in your book, you suspend your belief. You advise leaders to suspend their belief system based on other research, but you put it in the book. And tell me about that. I'm very interested because decision-making leaders, they make decisions sometimes based on perception. They may make the wrong decision, especially if the perception was wrong and mistaken and misguided. But you're telling them, you're advising them, suspend your belief system when you make your decision. Tell me about that.
You know, that's really an interesting part of what we wrote about. And it's not so much we're telling people to change what they believe. We're trying to explain to people that your beliefs can influence your decisions just as other people's beliefs can influence their decisions. So if you think of the influences of perception, you have things like experience, gender, intelligence, spirituality, culture, emotions. You know, those are all the influences that influence perception. But then you think about what perception influences, then you have your innovation, your critical thinking, your creativity, your engagement, collaboration, status quo, thinking, leadership, all those kinds of things. So before you jump to a conclusion and a rationalization of something based on all those, you know, your background, your cultural upbringing and everything else, you have to recognize that you have a different vantage point than everybody else. And if you don't build that empathy and develop your emotional intelligence to understand that it's an epic process, which we'll get into eventually here, when you go through the perception process, that you you don't know what you don't know, right? There's no really reality, there's just perception. And so your perception is going to be different from somebody else's. And I don't think that this discussion comes up enough. And that comes back into the question you asked of why did we write about this? And we were looking at so many different behavioral things that haven't been quantified necessarily. And that's what got me interested in curiosity to begin with, because I wanted to quantify what holds you back, right? So this is another thing, we're quantifying this perception process, because once you recognize that the things you don't know what you don't know until it's pointed out to you. And that was what we were trying to do with that.
And the good thing about this one, and the research you both made, is you came up with an index. After I listened to Dr. Maja with the question I'm going to ask her, I'd like you to, Dr. Diane, I'd like you further to explain what the index you came up with. I'll give you a time to collect your thoughts, and then I'll come back. So, Dr. Maja, how was the experience writing the book with Dr. Diane?
It was a beautiful experience. Dr. Diane is an experienced writer, an experienced author. She actually published several books prior to this one. It was for me, honestly, a humbling experience that out of all the options, all the choices she had, she trusted me to collaborate. Nice. We have a very, very different writing style. We also have a very different approach. And it was beautiful to see a combination of the two. And you mentioned something prior to our chat, that our book is written focusing on the world of business, but it is written in the manner that can be very enticing to the general audience members.
Everybody can read it. It's easy to read.
And it is well researched, but also it is written in a way that it is easy to read and easy to understand, and a lot of people can relate to some of its concepts. So it was a beautiful experience. I am sure that Diane and I will collaborate on other projects in the past, and I'm sure this will not be the last one. So it was beautiful to work with her.
Who wrote the segment on stereotype? Was it you or Dr. Diane, on when you talk about the blonde and you talk about this guy? And I read this thing and I kind of smiled. Who wrote that one? Was it you, Dr. Diane?
Actually, no, we collaborated on every single part of the book. So there wasn't any one section that either of us wrote, which made it really great. There was some editing and some things that were changed a little bit that we still are tweaking at the last minute in that chapter. So it's funny that you brought that up. But I think our point is, some people will stereotype you that, you know, hey, you're blonde, you're gonna be stupid, or whatever it is, you know what I mean? And you can't we can't be that way. We have to recognize that there are these misperceptions, and that was the point of that chapter. And I think it's really interesting to look at the writing styles. As Maja said, you know, we've written scholarly work together in the past. That's a completely different animal, because, you know, you've got a whole different kind of style and tone. And this is much more in the style and tone of my past books, because we're trying to get this for everybody in the workplace. This is not just for leaders, it's not just for employees, it's for everybody. And because, I mean, we all need to recognize the value of perception. And we cited a lot of great people who've been on my radio show, and who we, you know, Maja and I both know, great authors out there. And it was fun to just compile everything that we had learned, and we both learned a lot more from each other. When you see more historical kinds of interesting stories, this may be a little bit more Maja, because she's much more into historicals than I am. But I would say everything was a real collaboration.
That's wonderful. Let's continue with you and talk about the index. Tell me a little bit about your research there and what it led us. What you discovered, basically.
The index was, you know, it was pretty easy for me to do this. You know, I was working with Maja quite a bit at the beginning, before we even wrote the book, to work on this index, because I had done the curiosity code index. So coming up with the perception power index, it was a lot easier because I'd already made that wheel. And so the process was there, but the concept was completely different. And so she and I spent a lot of time looking through, you know, we had to do power analysis and different factor analysis to recognize if we were getting valid results, right? And so it took thousands of people taking the assessment over years, and we found that this is really an epic process of you know, we're going through, and I say epic because that's the acronym that we use, EPIC, to talk about the 4 factors that impact the perception process.
Can you tell me what they are?
Yes, they're evaluation, prediction, interpretation, and correlation. And evaluation is really your ability to self-evaluate. You look at how you in your tone, your body language, your composure, your self-control, how everything impacts your actions.
Self-awareness?
Self-awareness, very much. And then prediction, again, is another part. Is some of this coincides with what you know about emotional intelligence, you know, your empathy, your sensitivity, your, you know, prediction of what other people are going to react, how they're going to react. And a lot of that is difficult for people because they know what they are, but they don't know what other people are, right? And so that's a big part of it. And then interpretation, that's where the curiosity, the culture, a lot of that comes in, because we've got political backgrounds, religious backgrounds, spiritual backgrounds, you know, all these different things that how we reason and what's influenced of what we think is reality. And then in the end, we take all that to make our conclusions, but we have to do this correlation to do that. So you have to understand your vantage point, everybody else's vantage point, take into experience, your gender. I mean, all these things, take this whole process to a conclusion. And that's really what this assessment does. And when you take the assessment, it's just like taking a personality test, like something where you get your 25-page report, whatever, and it's really simple. It's 10 minutes. And we do training classes. We train HR professionals to become certified. We also go to organizations to train people. And so it's the kind of thing that either companies hire us or certified professionals to give it. And it's something that really is important right now, because there's never been a time you need to be more adaptable and pivot and all the things that require your ability to improve your perception.
That's wonderful. Nice to hear that. Dr. Maja, so let's say a leader listening to this show or podcast, and they want to bring the what you're teaching, the program, whether they're going to buy the book or they enroll in the program. What do you tell them? How important is perception for their own employees? Because we understand the book is for leaders, but how about the program? It's not only only leaders, probably most likely it is for the staff and employees as well. So what do you tell them? Take me into that journey of a leader listening to your pitch.
Sure. One of the ways that one can recognize impactful leadership, we mentioned in our book actually that their ability to see things, see things that others do not. And this particular book is written not only for current leaders, but also future leaders. So taking the index, taking the training, reading the book may help leaders and those who are aspiring to be leaders to sense when and when not to act, to actually be able to know exactly what actions to take. If they have a fine, perception that is well tuned, for lack of better words, when it comes to their business acumen, when it comes to their emotional intelligence, that will set them apart from others. Mm-hmm. So they will be able to better see, for lack of better words, what's coming around before it arrives, and also to hear the key elements in the conversation of others, and to able to evaluate and predict what the others are thinking and what the others are wanting to do. So they can help. This can help them in leading more effectively, in motivating their employees, and also envision and ultimately implement solutions that others may not be able to see. So it is, it is easy to say it's making them into a better leaders. And those who aspire to be leaders, we are gearing towards the concept of every single leader has to be able to be a global leader, a successful global leader. This is removing the boundaries within one's mind. So once you become aware of your own perceptions and some of the mechanisms impacting our own perceptions that Diane mentioned, the experience, the culture, the spirituality, and life experiences, we will be more in tune with the perception of others. And then we were talking about, just recently, I worked on a blog article that I had a situation a few years back, well, more than a few years back, where the leader was given a very negative feedback, and all of the entire team was complaining about his leadership skills. He was completely unaware. His perception of his own leadership was vastly different. So how can you align that perception of oneself, or what are you trying to project, better align it to the concept of business reality? So that is the combination of a book, the training, and the index can help leaders out there and their employees to become better leaders and better functional human beings within their companies, and more productive, more motivated.
What I'm sensing, you can use that in your marketing as well. I'm sensing that you're connecting the past and the present. I'll explain. Perception is based on experience. You have an experience, you build a perception, a preconceived notion. That's the past. Through your book, through your program, index, you're making people more mindful. So they become mindful of the present time. So really, you're connecting the past and the present through this program. Mm-hmm. That's an excellent discovery, where the past and present meet in this program you have.
Yeah, and
isn't that something?
Future too. I'd like to. I think
there is no present. Present meaning, because whatever we talked a few seconds ago, that became a past. So future is it's really becomes a future is always there. Future is ahead of us. The few seconds we talked is part of the past. Few seconds past. So the present moment, meaning being mindful of others, being emotionally intelligent. In a program like yours, of course, bring these qualities to either the leadership or the people in general. So this, congratulations to both of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. You're always, I told Dr. Diane, she's a trendsetter. I've always said that to you, and you have been. And Maja, you are in the right wagon. Continue that excellent work. We're proud of you. We're proud of both of you and what you have achieved, and trying to help society in making this world a better place, because programs like this and ideas like this is innovation at play. because everybody talks about perception, but you looked at it differently and you put it in a program. So congratulations. What else do you want to talk about? What else do you want people to know?
I'd like to add to that, because Maja has definitely inspired me to be a better researcher. And I think that, you know, the things that you excel at, you realize, this one, I know this, but she knows that. And you know, and you complement each other in these different ways. And as we started to write this, it was a very equal kind of, you know, idea of what we wanted to accomplish. And in terms of who this book would be really suited for, and if it's just for leaders, I think, you know, it was interesting to me to look at some of the research out there of who's looked at the power of perception. Coca-Cola, for example, has required 1 year for the spouse to go through the multiple perception training whenever they have to move. And it's the old happy wife, happy life, or happy husband, happy life, whatever rhymes with husband kind of thinking, right? So we want to have that. If we're going to go somewhere, we don't have the culture shock, and we want to look at just how much things like you take for granted, small talk. What does it mean here? What does it mean in India? What does hand-holding mean here? What does it mean in Asian culture? Well, you know, and there's HBR's done these 40 case studies about having, if you have the same ethnicity in your team as somebody else with whom they're doing business, you're going to have 152% likelier output of what you would like to achieve. So I think that what is really important is to look at the research of how important this is for everybody, because we want diverse teams. You know, when I used to train at Myers-Briggs training alone, we would put people on these teams and they would all be the same in some teams, and they would create really boring, uninteresting products. You give them Legos, they'd come up with a little stupid house. No one, well, okay, you know, you put together these really diverse teams, you give them Legos, they build you a castle.
Exactly.
And you want that, you want this diversity, but with that diversity comes this conflict and comes communication, miscommunication type of things. And so we know that companies are losing hundreds of billions a year on communication issues. We know people are hired for their knowledge and fired for their behaviors. So that's why looking at behavioral things could only help people improve in their jobs, because you have a very short time in the interview process to convince somebody that you're the right person. And once you're in there, that's when your bad behaviors, your bad habits, your bad things will show up, and that's when people get fired. So I think it's really critical for employees to recognize that they don't know what they don't know until they go through a program like this.
Yes.
The things that help them make appropriate communications, and that was our real hope.
Nicely said. And you talked about the research, and who's a better researcher than a Fulbright researcher on their side, huh?
I agree.
Dr. Maja.
I'm on that wagon, I'll tell you.
Well, but I also, to add to, and thank you, to add to what Diane was saying, as companies are spending millions and millions of dollars on negotiation and conflict resolution. But a lot of times at the very core of that conflict is the perception disconnect. So why spend money on something that happened after the fact versus actually invest in understanding some of the conflict triggers, which are, you have a very simple example of 10 people entering the conference room with their leader, and leader is communicating what he or she thinks is a very simple message, and then you end up having 10 different perceptions of what that message was.
Exactly.
Those are the type of things that companies can certainly work on in order to prevent some things from escalating, and in order to ensure sustainable business and motivated employees. And back to Diane's point pertaining to the global and diverse teams, as we travel and as we do, and we talked about a little bit of the first time I've done an interview with you, it's just approaching everyone with that concept of being humble, observant, and sometimes it is perfectly fine to be silent and just watch, because like I said, we are perceiving so many things which may or may not be aligned to that concept of reality. One of the things that Diane and I went back and forth on, I kept going going back to the concept of Greek philosophers and is there such a thing as a reality? And there were a few times that we went back and forth on that. But, you know, that's why we always say align to that ever fluid concept of business reality. And as you said, 5 minutes prior to now, you know, we are now in that future. So, you know, we're all striving to align ourselves to the concept of business reality as we make decisions and as we make judgment calls.
What I like is you tapped into the logic of the Greek philosophers, but you wrote it in a way laymen can read this book. There are, when you talk about the agility of the leaders, when you talk about the, as I said earlier, suspend judgment, these are concepts that based on logic, based on humanity, and you're telling people to be better human beings in dealing with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you both. Where can people find you? Do you have a website for this? Did you brand this? Where can people find it?
Well, you know, you could go to perceptionpowerindex.com to take the index, and
Okay.
it's all, our company is DEMA Innovations. And so we work with individuals and we work with consultants, we work with companies, we work with anybody to get, you know, we have a certification class so they can get 5 hours of SHRM recertification credit going through that if they're a consultant and they want to go to organizations and help them build their perception skills. So it's very, you know, a lot of this is also on both of our sites, drmajazelihic.com and drdianehamilton.com. You can find us everywhere. But really, if you know, the Perception Power Index will take you right to it. Of course, the books are wherever the books are sold. Amazon's probably the easiest, of course. And
is it released now? Are they released or still?
Oh yeah,
the books is there. Beautiful.
There we go.
Nice. Nice.
Yes, it's available.
So it's already out. It's already.
Yes,
I didn't realize it's out already.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's wonderful.
So index is available. You can take it today, and it takes 10 minutes, and you can change your perception of everything just by doing it.
What do we call it? We call it a geared perception, a guided perception. What do you call it?
I look at it as an epic perception of the perception process. You know, you think of it as just an epic understanding is probably what it is. Mm-hmm. We looked at the factors that impact perception, and it really was more of a process than anything else. And if you can recognize the process you go through and the factors that impact that process, then you have an open mind to recognizing how these things that we've talked about influence your decisions. And it helps to build that empathy. It helps build that awareness, and it helps teach you that you don't know what you thought you knew. And if you can open up your mind to what you don't really recognize, then you're going to be a much better communicator and a more effective global leader.
Global leader. Do you think that's also leading to probably the first steps of enlightenment?
I think so. You know, when Daniel Goleman was on my show, we talked about how, you know, curiosity and some of these things, because now he's into mindfulness. And I think, you know, I talk about some of this in my courses on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I mean, it comes into so many different areas. So I think you're going to hear a lot about perception. I think it ties into, you know, the field of curiosity, the field of mindfulness, emotional intelligence. I don't think you can cover all behaviors in one course. And I think this is a really big area, because I think culture is a huge part of it, and we're getting to be much more diverse, and to really recognize how our differences, we're more alike than we are different. But that little bit of difference we need to recognize and be more flexible.
If we can probably put anything or another subtitle to this book, I may say celebrate the difference, right? Celebrate the differences.
Yeah, love that.
Which you end up with it. Dr. Maja, what else do you want to add?
Well, I think that as we were working on this, the research and everything was focused on, you know, within the business arena. But I feel that I've learned a lot, helping me in a personal setting as well. So as our readers are going through the book and applying some of its concepts in the world of business, understanding perception, polishing your perception helps you in every single venue of life. So going back to that concept that Diane mentioned, mindfulness, being aware, being in tune, and being able to pause. And one of the things that I've learned pertaining to my perception is I do have to step back and then pause and then reflect on certain things. So I do feel that, yes, it is a business book geared towards business leaders and leaders who are not yet leaders, but will be one day. But it can also help in many different concepts of life.
You know, I'd like to add to what Maja said, because I think one of my favorite stories in the book was two salespeople who went in and just got slammed on a presentation they gave. And, you know, as we're looking at things, is what's positive, what's negative, it's so important to recognize that you can make everything be positive or negative based on your perception of it. And in that particular story, the gentleman came out with his tail between his legs going, "Oh, they killed it. We lost. It was horrible. It was, you know, the end of the world." Where the female salesperson came out going, you know, and it wasn't meant that men are one way or women or another. It just happened to be in this story. She was like, "Wow, that was great. They told us everything we need to fix."
Exactly.
And if we hadn't had that, I often tell a story where I had that something horrible happen to me in a sales presentation, that if that hadn't happened, I would have thought I was the greatest salesperson ever. But because it was pointed out to me by accident that I did something really stupid, that I'm like, oh, who's not telling me this? I want to know this. And I'm one of those people, if I say something incorrectly, please fix, you know, whatever it is I'm doing, tell me. And I think that people need to look at the things that they could improve and recognize that what we think is bad might not be bad. It might be just a way to fix something to make it better for the next time.
It's the way you look at the cup. It's half full or half empty.
There's a lot of that.
Isn't it? Yeah. So I take it, since perception is based on experience, having you for the third time, so you have a good perception of the show.
I had a good perception the first time. The second time, I'm always happy to be on your show. This is always so much fun. And it's always nice to see you at Forbes events and everything else that we've shared. So thank you for inviting us.
It's lovely to see both of you. I am very happy to share with my audience this beautiful news. And it's because it's also beneficial. It's beneficial to all. So I do thank you. And I'm going to have you end the show. If you have anything else you want to add, feel free to do that. Both of you, Dr. Maja, Dr. Diane.
I think it's good.
Thank you so much for having us. As Diane mentioned, always a pleasure. Looking forward to seeing you on some of the Forbes events, hopefully in the near future.
Hope so too.
And, you know, we appreciate you. We appreciate your audience members. And thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
Well, thank you. And also, you know, if you've had a chance to read our book and you bought it on Amazon, leave us a review. I'd love to hear what you think of it, because improves our perception of everything, of how we can improve. So please do.
The book is The Power of Perception. The author is Dr. Diane Hamilton and Dr. Maja Zelihic. Thank you.
Thank you.